The Buffalo Bills roster features several new additions. What should we expect from them in 2024? I'm breaking that down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I am your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, welcome in. I was texting with a listener to this podcast. We have the Locked On Bills subtext community where I text one-on-one with listeners and share my first thoughts on Bills news and send out updates, and you get access to our Discord channel. A lot of cool stuff. If you want to be part of the Locked On Bills subtext community, I'd encourage you to check that out. There's a link in today's show notes to join. And I was texting with this person, and they came up with a pretty cool show idea. And so I'm going to do that today, and it is to examine the new roster additions. And let's talk about realistic expectations. Everyone gets excited about all the new players, right? But what can we really expect from them to do in 2024? And so I want to break it up like this. Let's talk about the offensive veteran additions, then the defensive veteran additions, then the 2024 draft class. So we're going to get to a bunch of players. And if you recall, I did a 53-man roster projection maybe a week or two ago, and I had 20 players make the roster that had no affiliation to the Buffalo Bills in 2023. That's 37% turnover. So a lot of new players, and today we're going to discuss what to expect from them. Let's start with the offensive veteran additions. Curtis Samuel's up first, wide receiver. This is the biggest contract that the Bills gave to a player from outside of their team this offseason. What do I expect from him? I think he's going to be a featured part of this offense. And primarily as a receiver, but I think he'll get some carries as well. Last time he was with Joe Brady in Carolina, he had a career-high 42 carries. So I'd expect him to get some opportunities to run with the ball in his hands, but also receive 80 to 100 targets. I think realistically that's a comfortable range for me. I think he's going to be one of the top 3 or 4 most targeted players in this passing game. So, of course, barring any injuries, I think he's going to get plenty of touches, both as a runner and as a receiver, but also he's the guy in the return game that gets me pretty excited. The new kickoff rule is huge. This is the biggest rule change that has come across in my lifetime of watching the NFL. And you want guys like Curtis Samuel who have speed, but also are instinctive with the ball in their hands to create explosive returns. I think he could be the Bills' best opportunity to get that. So I guess you could call Curtis Samuel a multifaceted playmaker for the Bills in 2024. I have high expectations. We'll go on to another wide receiver. The first 4 guys are going to be receivers. Next up is Mack Hollins, a veteran wide receiver. I think you can expect for him to be a special teams ace first and foremost, a gunner, a jammer on the punt teams, a guy that blocks, of course, on kick and punt return. I think that'll be a big part of his role because it always has been. Going back to North Carolina and throughout his NFL career, he's been a special teams captain in the NFL. That's his calling card. But he's also a big-bodied physical receiver that should help the Bills when it comes to blocking, whether that's on the perimeter for quick passes or as an insert blocker in the run game, but also get a few opportunities to make some plays down the field. He's got very good hands and ball skills and size. He's a guy that has a history of making plays down the field. I'm not sure he's going to get a ton of volume, but 30, 40 targets, something like that, with a few big chunk plays along the way. I think that's what you can expect from Mack Hollins as the 5th or 6th receiver in this offense, and of course a big role on special teams. Next up is wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling, coming over from a couple of seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think with MVS, you look at him and he's the best vertical receiving threat on the team. Like, if you're looking for a guy that has speed, size, and ball skills down the field, it's MVS. That's what he does. So I think that element's going to be a big part of what he offers this team. The question for me with him is between Keon Coleman and Chase Claypool and himself, who's getting most of the reps outside, right? That's going to be fascinating to me. I think you could probably talk yourself into any one of those three, and maybe some weeks it'll be one guy versus the other. But I think he will factor in as a deep threat for this team. The volume piece is where I struggle. And again, that could be more situational week to week. Chase Claypool is next, another wide receiver, another big-bodied wide receiver. He's really tough because you look at the first couple seasons of his career and you thought he was potentially a star in the making. You look at the last 2 seasons of his career and you wonder why maybe he's still in the NFL. I expect Chase Claypool to come in and compete and make noise. And then it'll evolve from there. First of all, are you one of the best 6 receivers on the team, right? Because that's how many I think the Bills will roster. They might only roster 5. They only rostered 5 last year, so it's not crazy to think that. But if they do roster 6, come in and become one of the best 6. And then from there, it's just about how you acclimate and who you take reps away from. And I think he's in direct competition with Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Keon Coleman for those opportunities. So my expectation for Chase Claypool, come in and compete and then make some noise and make it hard for this team to not involve you in the game plans. So a bunch of wide receivers. Now we have 2 offensive linemen and then Mitchell Trubisky. The 2 offensive linemen, will start with La'el Collins, kind of a right tackle / interior, well, guard, really. It's not an interior player, either a guard or a tackle. My expectations for La'el Collins is to come in and challenge the depth. I don't think he's going to start for this team. He'd have to beat out Spencer Brown, or he'd have to beat out Osiris Torrance. That's not going to happen. Or he'd have to beat out David Edwards. I don't really see that happening. But what he can do is challenge the depth. Look at a guy like Ryan Vandermark, who was the Bills' swing tackle last year. He deserves competition, and I think he'll get that in the form of La'el Collins. Same thing with Alec Anderson, who could be in line to be the first guy off the bench at guard. Maybe La'el Collins challenges him. Both of those guys rostered players last year. So I think La'el Collins' role here is to push to be one of the 9 offensive linemen that they roster, and from there really challenge the depth and make sure that the Bills are in good shape if one of their starting 5 goes down. Next up is Will Clapp, another veteran interior offensive lineman. I look at Will Clapp as insurance in case the Bills have some injuries on the interior offensive line. He's got experience playing guard and center, but I don't know that he makes this roster. I think he's on the outside looking in. I think he'll need things to go his way to be rostered, starting with La'el Collins to flop as a signing. I think that would be step 1 in Clapp's path to the roster. Then number 2 is kind of really holding off Richard Garage, who I think there might be some momentum for as a guy that was on the practice squad last year, entering year 2, getting some opportunities to play guard in addition to tackle. And I think he's going to get some chances to snap as well and play center. So I think he'll have to stiff arm all of that. And then, even if that happens, he might need an injury to like Alec Anderson to make the roster. I think he's a bit of a long shot, but a guy you'd love to have on the practice squad as a experienced player that has the versatility to play center or guard. The last one's really easy. It's Mitchell Trubisky. I expect him to come in and be the backup quarterback, and hopefully we never watch you play. Just in the preseason, we'll enjoy that. But come in and be QB2, be an asset to Josh Allen, both in the practice settings, on the sideline, during games, be that player peer that can help Josh Allen play optimally each and every week. So those are my expectations for the offensive veteran additions. The defensive veteran additions, and of course the rookie class, all coming your way. So be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's talk defensive veteran additions, expectations. What are we thinking we're going to see from these players? What at least am I thinking we're going to see from these players? We'll start with defensive tackle Austin Johnson. I think he comes in and is the primary backup to Daquan Jones as an A-gap defender, nose tackle type player. And I expect him to be better than Tim Settle. I think that's a pretty reasonable path. Obviously, Johnson and Jones have some rapport together, and I think he's a very underrated addition in the overall landscape of what the Bills were able to get done this offseason. To have a steady guy like that to come in and spell Daquan Jones, to add more size and beef and run-stopping ability to the middle of the defense, I think is great. And I think he can absolutely elevate what the Bills have received from Tim Settle and or Jordan Phillips. So I think he'll play 35% of the snaps and have a role. Next up is defensive tackle DeShawn Williams. I think this is a very underrated signing for the Bills. I think a lot of people kind of dismissed it and said, yeah, that's not really a meaningful addition. I don't know. He started 44 games over the last 4 seasons, and you watch his tape, it's pretty good. If you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this, I really enjoyed watching DeShawn Williams tape and studying him after the Bills signed him. I see athleticism. I see upside in this scheme because he played in Denver and Carolina, both odd front defenses. He's playing really a 4-eye, 5-tech, occasionally as a nose. Get this guy in an up-the-field penetration-style defense and see if he can make some plays. I think he can. So my expectation for DeShawn Williams is to make it tough on Dwayne Carter, who is the Bills' 3rd-round defensive tackle pick out of Duke, and potentially be the primary backup for Ed Oliver. I think there's a chance that DeShawn Williams winds up being a pretty useful player for this football team. Next up is Dwayne Smoot, veteran defensive end addition. Spent a bunch of years in Jacksonville. Now he comes over to Buffalo. The way that his contract is structured, he's going to make the team. They have void years on it. He's going to make the team. I think Dwayne Smoot can come in and be the 4th defensive end. That Shaq Lawson role that we've seen over the last couple of seasons, and elevate that. I think that Shaq Lawson's a high-quality run defender. I think Dwayne Smoot can also be a high-quality run defender for this team, but I think he can give the Bills more pass rush juice. Maybe not a ton of pass rush juice, but comparing him to Shaq Lawson, I think there's more. I think there's more to unlock there. And he's got the Jaguars secrets, right? So he can come over and tell us what the heck's going on with them and how to beat them. But I think Dwayne Smoot will play between 20 and 30% of the snaps. Really, I think what matters a lot there in kind of figuring out how much volume there is for Dwayne Smoot is asking yourself how much volume there is for Von Miller and how much volume there is for A.J. Epinesa. I think Rousseau's going to play a bunch. He'll play 60% of the snaps. But is A.J. Epinesa going to be a 50% of the time player? Is Von Miller 40%? Is Von Miller 60%? Like, who knows? I think the scraps, if you will, get picked up by Dwayne Smoot. And then, obviously there's some other guys behind him, whether that's Javon Solomon as a rookie. We'll talk about him, obviously. Casey Tuhill, Kingsley Jonathan, who makes the team, who doesn't? How do they factor into the mix? But Dwayne Smoot, defensive end 4 in the Shaq Lawson role with more pass rush juice. Defensive end Casey Tuhill, another veteran addition. My expectations are low here. I guess my hope is that he can make it tough on Javon Solomon and Kingsley Jonathan. Javon Solomon as a rookie draft pick out of Troy, pass rusher. Kingsley Jonathan as a returning player that was on the team last year. But I watched Casey Tuhill's tape, and I wasn't overly inspired. I see a guy that plays really, really hard, and he's got some athleticism, but technical refinement, processing skills, they're below average. And so there's more upside in Solomon and Jonathan, and I don't think you have room for more than one of those three. I think the X factor here for a guy like Casey Tuhill is special teams, because you could see him playing well on special teams, but Kingsley Jonathan also does that. But with this new kickoff rule, where I think covering kicks, okay, is going to be a lot like defending wide zone runs. You need somebody that can set edges, maintain leverage, disengage, and make a tackle. That's what defensive ends do. So that all bodes very well for guys like Casey Tuhill and Kingsley Jonathan. But I'd be surprised if the Bills went with Tuhill over Jonathan. So I don't know that Tuhill makes the team, barring injury. We got some linebackers to talk about. Nicholas Morrow next up. I think he's got a real chance to be the third linebacker. If none of these young guys takes a step, you think about Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Adefwan Ulofoshio. If the Bills don't have a level of comfort with any of those three players, I think Nicholas Morrow is your LB3, your primary backup to both Bernard and Milano, as a veteran, experienced player that's been in schemes like the Bills. I think what's important about Nicholas Morrow is that he's more stylistically similar to what the Bills have in their starters than Tyrel Dotson was. Morrow's an athletic space player that don't get carried away, but he does profile as a matchup player, which we know the Bills prefer. We've heard him say it. Tyrel Dotson is not that, right? And so because Tyrel Dotson was your LB3, when he had to play, you had to reinvent your defensive scheme to compensate for what he lacked. I like Nicholas Morrow in that role because I don't think you have to do as much of that. Now, certainly there's a drop-off in talent, don't get me wrong. But the stylistic similarities to what the Bills have in their starters makes for an easier transition should, that LB3 have to play. I think you can copy-paste everything I just said about Nicholas Morrow to Deion Jones, veteran linebacker addition who was an absolute star for a while. The last couple of seasons have not been good. He's had a shoulder deal that he's been working through. So I think copy-paste everything I said about Nicholas Morrow to Deion Jones, but less likely that it happens. I don't know that both of those guys make this team. But I think a lot of that's determined by what you get out of Balin Spector and how much trust the team has. I think the Bills can roster 6 linebackers. I think the special team stuff helps a lot. So if 2 of those linebackers are Bernard and Milano, you've got this mix of Morrow, Jones, Ulofoshio, Spector, and Williams. You have 5 guys for 4 spots. So it can happen. Maybe you redshirt Ulofoshio. He has some type of injury. You'd put him on the Justin Shorter plan. Maybe Balin Spector is just too injury prone and you'd put him on the practice squad. There's a path for this to happen. But I think more likely for Morrow than Jones. Then a couple of safeties, Mike Edwards and Delaney. My expectations for Mike Edwards, I think he can and should start opposite of Taylor Rapp. I know he's not been able to participate in the offseason due to the shoulder. Hopefully that's different come training camp. He's ready to go. But I don't know. I just love his tape. I watch Mike Edwards, and I've been a fan of him since his time at Kentucky. Liked him in Tampa. Liked him with the Chiefs. Versatile, can play deep zones, ball skills, tackles, man coverage, split zones. I mean, he's a good player. I'd love for him to start opposite of Taylor Rapp. Now, that comes with an asterisk. If Cole Bishop's ready to go, yeah, sure, he can start. No problem. No pushback here. I have a level of concern that Cole Bishop's going to be ready to go as like the better option than Mike Edwards or Taylor Rapp this season. We'll get to Cole Bishop on the other side of the break, but I think Mike Edwards should factor in as a starter for this team. Good football player. And the last guy on defense is veteran safety Delaney. Was added after the draft, has been a good special teams player throughout his career. I think my expectations for him is to come in and challenge the safety depth, thinking about Cam Lewis and Damar Hamlin to be safety 4. Your top 3 safeties, Rapp, Edwards, Bishop. And then you have Delaney, Cam Lewis, and Damar Hamlin competing for one spot unless the Bills keep 5 safeties. I think that would probably be unlikely. But Delaney, come in, challenge those dudes. Because, I mean, Cam Lewis probably the favorite there, but I think you look at Cam Lewis as somewhat of a versatile player and think of him as, well, he can play safety, corner, slot, plays, average 20 special team snaps a game last year, and you can find your value there. So Delaney would have to kind of force the issue. I don't think it's that crazy, right? Like if Delaney made the team, I'm not sure I'd be overly surprised. So his job is to come in and challenge this safety depth. All right, folks, we're going to get to the draft class. The Bills drafted 10 players. I'll give you my year one expectation for every one of them on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with me. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. So there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. In fact, they just launched some Bills team specials. Check these out. Maybe you like some of these. They have the Bills to score 1 touchdown in every regular season game in 2024. You can get that at minus 120. They have Greg Rousseau. If you think double-digit sacks are coming for Greg Rousseau, you can get Greg Rousseau to record 10 or more sacks for plus 470. And Keon Coleman, you think a big year's coming for him? They have 10 or more receiving yards for Keon Coleman in the regular season at plus 700. So check all that out. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's talk about this rookie class and what to expect from these guys, or what I'm expecting from these guys in year one. We'll go in order of how they were drafted. We'll start, of course, with Keon Coleman, pick 33, second rounder. I think there's a wide range of outcomes for Keon Coleman as a rookie. Can he outsnap MVS? Can he outsnap Chase Claypool? Is he the best option to be the X receiver this year? And maybe that's not true in week one. Maybe that gradually happens throughout the course of the season. He's very young player. You should be excited about the upside and the investment made and what he could be for this team. How quickly does that happen, right? We're talking year one expectations. My eventual expectation is for Keon Coleman to be the Bills' starting X receiver and demand 100 targets, right? That's my long-term expectation. But for 2024, at 21 years old? Very young. I just want him to flash. I want him to show promise. I want to watch Keon Coleman this season and feel like, yeah, you know what? The Bills got their answer here. In some way, shape, or form, this guy is going to be a meaningful answer for this Bills wide receiver core. Is that a prominent role as a rookie? I mean, you look at some of the fantasy projections that are out there for Keon Coleman, people are expecting some stuff. I'll land on my expectations at some point, but I don't know that I'm going to project like 80, 90 targets for him. I think it could be 50 to 60, make some plays, but there's some competition here. And who convinces Joe Brady that they're the right guy to be the full-time X receiver? Maybe it is Keon Coleman. I'll be fascinated to find out. Other second-round pick, Cole Bishop, safety out of Utah, number 60 overall. I want to see Cole Bishop compete to start. Obviously, I think you look at Mike Edwards as the player he would have to beat out. You've heard Sean McDermott say that Taylor Rapp is taking control of the safety room. They signed him to a 3-year deal. Like, Taylor Rapp's going to start. Can Cole Bishop be his running mate? Like, you just heard me rave about Mike Edwards. I kind of see that as an uphill climb. So my realistic expectation for Cole Bishop in 2024, is to be the third safety, factor in a lot on special teams, and get ready to be a full-time starter in 2025. Third round pick, Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle out of Duke, number 95 overall. Obviously, he's a 3 technique, so he'll play behind Ed Oliver. So come in and compete with DeShawn Williams for snaps. Like, either showcase enough that DeShawn Williams doesn't make this team, or make it a hard decision every week for who's going to get the jersey, because the Bills will give 4 defensive tackle a jersey on game days. I think you know who the top 3 are. The other jersey goes to either Williams or Carter. Want to see Carter, make it tough for it to not be him, and then show us enough that in 2025 we say, yeah, you know what? That's the guy behind Ed Oliver. Round 4, Ray Davis, Kentucky, number 128 overall, the running back. I think Ray Davis can come in and be the RB2. And as I've said earlier this week, we did a podcast on James Cook and the Bills running back situation. And the point that I made is that, James Cook's an explosive, dynamic playmaker, but his skill set lacks things. And everything that it lacks, you can find in Ray Davis. Short yardage ability, upside in pass protection, the physical nature. He's 5'8" and some change, 215 pounds, low center of gravity. Come in and get some work. I mean, could Ray Davis compete for 100 touches this year? It wouldn't surprise me. I think Ray Davis is going to have a pretty big role. Like, he could be one of the most meaningful rookies that this team has. And I think that it would be really good for the offense if that were true, because I think you'd get more out of James Cook and you'd absorb some of those areas where he lacks in the former Ray Davis. 5th round pick, Cedric Vann Granger, interior offensive lineman out of Georgia. My expectation for Vann Granger is to challenge to be the first off the bench at guard or center. I don't know if year 1 starting is in the cards for him to beat out David Edwards or Connor McGovern, obviously. But can he be the first one off the bench? Can he take that from Lyle Collins or Alec Anderson? Maybe. And one thing I'll say about Vann Granger, do not pay him as a center only. Don't do it. Don't do it, folks. He's going to get opportunities to play guard. And I have a level of confidence based on his power, right? Like, the reason you would think of somebody as a center only is because you feel like they need bumpers on either side of them. And you don't want them to have to go, man on man a lot. You want him to be able to have a lot of help. It's not the issue with Ced. Ced's got plenty of functional strength. He could play guard. Don't write that off. And maybe he's your eventual starter at left guard. Just keep that within the realm of possibilities inside your mind to happen. 5th round pick, Edefwan Ulafosio, linebacker, Washington. I think his year 1 role is special teams and depth. And depending on how this linebacker depth shakes out, you could see him as a stash player, right? Like, put him on injured reserve and keep him there all season, and then we'll see what happens in 2025. 5th round pick, defensive end, Javon Solomon out of Troy. I'd love for him to carve out a role as a designated pass rusher, like long and late downs, play him 200 snaps this year and just have him rush. Think about like what the Lions got out of James Houston a couple of years ago. I would be through the moon if Javon Solomon could do something like that. So that's unfair for me to say that that's my expectation. That's my hope. I think in all likelihood, a lot of times if he makes the roster, he'll be inactive. The Bills will dress 4. It'll be Rousseau, Miller, Epinesa, and Smoot. But if there's ever an injury and he gets an opportunity, or if the Bills want to, dress 5 and he can play teams and provide value as a designated pass rusher, that would be awesome. 6th round pick, tackle Tylan Greene out of UCF. I think he's a long shot to make the roster. I think he's the ideal practice squad candidate. Put him on there for a year, see if he can develop, and then maybe he can push the envelope to be in the mix to be the swing tackle next year. But I watched this tape and I just didn't feel like there was much gravitational pull to him, which what I mean by that is the ability to sustain blocks and stay on blocks. And I thought he was easily disengaged from, and you see the size and movement skills, but his ability to sustain blocks was very poor. I think he needs a lot of work. So I think he'll probably be on the practice squad. 6th-round pick, cornerback Dayquon Hardy out of Penn State. I think there's a good chance that he's your primary punt returner this year. He did a great job of that last season at Penn State, has big-time speed. And I liked his tape at slot corner as well. So I think he's your primary backup to Taron Johnson. Well, maybe that'll be Cam Lewis. So he'll be in the mix to be that. But also, the big thing is if he can carve out that punt return job, he'll get a jersey on game day, and that'll be big for his trajectory with the team. And the last one is an easy one. 7th-round pick, Travis Clayton, guard from Europe, rugby player. I think that Travis Clayton will enjoy the season learning the game as the 17th man of the practice squad. So the Bills get that additional practice squad spot because they drafted Travis Clayton through the International Pathway program. And so if you remember the Christian Wade dynamics, it'll be very similar to that, where he's roster exempt. The Bills right now can carry 91 players on the active roster, and then they'll be able to keep 17 instead of 16 on the practice squad, assuming that it's Travis Clayton. So I think that's very clearly what he'll do this season, but it'll be a fun player to check out in preseason if he gets on the field and what that looks like. And, him and Gable Steveson, like 2 guys that have never played football, they'll be fun to check out during training camp and preseason. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed my look at the expectations for all these new Bills players. Would love to hear from you. Leave me a comment here on YouTube. What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? What are some of the big expectations that you have for new players? Or join the Locked On Bills subtext community, and we can text one-on-one about all things Buffalo Bills whenever you want to. So, as always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.